I hope you'll have a good time now. Very warm welcome to this webinar on blockchain in supply chain. And thanks, first of all, for sharing your valuable time with us. Okay, I really appreciate it. And we are around, in terms of registrations, we are going to be around 50, I guess. People are just trickling in from different parts of the world. We have people from Brazil, from Canada, some places in South America, from India, a lot of people from Europe, and some people from US and some from Australia. So yeah, so there are a few people who have registered, and people are trickling in now, right? So thank you very much. What we will do is we will go through some of the key aspects of blockchain in supply chain today. And before that, what I would like to do is give you quick logistics information, and then do a quick round of introduction as well. In terms of logistics, on the top of your screen, you will have an option to change your language. So you can change your language of preference, okay, whichever you're comfortable with. And for interactivity during the session, what we have is we have a chat session. So it's a moderated chat. We have our colleague Silmara from EIPM who is actually moderating it. So we'll communicate through chat, and whenever possible, either at a logical break or at a conclusion of a certain topic, we will take the answers. If not, we will take those. We'll take the questions, and if not, at the end of the webinar. Okay. Unfortunately, we won't be able to interact directly by voice due to technical reasons. So this will kind of remain a monologue, let's say, yeah. And I hope we'll do our best not to put you to sleep. I hope you had your coffees in the afternoon and in the morning, yeah, and the late evening, wherever you're logged in from. Right. A quick introduction. My name is Manish Shandak. Okay, I'm from EIPM, the European Institute of Purchasing Management, and together with Clotilde Hanatel from Ashaz Consulting. Okay, we will take you through the webinar today on blockchain in supply chain. Okay, and the last logistics part, before the questions come in, we will share this presentation at the end. Yeah, whoever has logged in with, they will get the presentation in a PDF format. Okay, right. So quick words about EIPM. Yeah, so as the acronym stands, it's for European Institute of Purchasing Management. Okay, organized across 3 pillars. As you can see, one is on education. So we're doing the global executive MBA, certification programs, training modules, and so on. We do a lot of research, like CPO roundtables, workshops, webinars such as these. Yeah, and the findings of these research are then plugged into our academia as well. Yeah. Then in the third one, pillar is an in-company program where we have customized training and training solutions or coaching solutions to companies. Right. So that's how we are organized in 3 ways. We are based out of Geneva, yeah, but we have offices pretty much spread across everywhere in the world, from in the US and in South America, in India, a few places in Europe, and so on, and soon in the Middle East, right? So we are spread across in quite a few places, right? I'll quickly hand over the baton to Clotilde for an introduction of Ashaz and herself, and then we will carry on with the webinar. Clotilde, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Manish, and welcome everybody to this webinar as well. I'm really happy to share this webinar with you this afternoon, morning, or evening, depending from where you are connecting. And just a few words regarding Ashaz before Manish is walking you through the presentation of the blockchain technology. So Ashaz is a consultancy specialized in procurement, and we develop 3 main activities or develop our activities in 3 main areas. First of all, I would say it's about classical procurement consultancy activities, but then we have extended our services to partners developing excellence in their field. This is about Cievo, that turns procurement data into higher financial performance for the business, and Dragon Sourcing that drives sourcing in low-cost countries. And the last area that we are working in is about innovation, where we added last year the blockchain technology, because it represents really a huge potential of improvement that can be led by procurement. So, and we'll explain this a little bit later. So yeah, that's it for Ashaz, and Manish, I hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Clotilde. Okay, so here is the brief agenda that gives you a quick overview of what we're going to do in the next 50 or 60 minutes. We're going to talk about blockchain basics, yeah, then some applications of blockchain, and then more specifically blockchain in supply chain, yeah, and then Clotilde will take you through certain takeaways, because ultimately what we want to do is we hear about all this, but what is it in it for me and my company and my entity? So there's a certain takeaway message as well for you. Okay, right. What we'll also want to be clear about is what is not there at the agenda. So we're not going to certainly talk about cryptocurrencies and their trading. Okay, we're not going to talk about Bitcoin, Litecoin, or Neo, or Peercoin, or whatever. So we're not going to talk about all these cryptocurrencies, whether it is wise to invest or not. We have seen a hyper rise on the value of the Bitcoin over the past few months, and it made a lot of news. So we're not going to talk about that. Effectively not about Bitcoin, cold wallet, hot wallet, you know, and the last hack on the Ethereum blockchain, right? So we're not going to go into those details or technical details, let's say. Okay. Right. So what we're going to do now is, before we start off, I'm going to pose across a poll for you. Just a simple questionnaire. Okay. So on your screens, you're going to see a question. Okay. For which there are multiple answers. So you could, according to your understanding, you could choose the answers. And don't forget to click on end vote and share the answers, okay? End voting after you're done, because that's how I can collect the answers, and then we'll talk about what you guys have shared. So remember, this is anonymous, so nobody knows who is answering, but it's just the volume that will give us a good view on what the people are thinking here on the webinar. Okay, so I'm going to put across this poll question on your screens. Do click on whatever you think is appropriate answer for this, and then we'll talk about it in a bit. Okay, you have around a few seconds. It should be enough, yeah, around 30 to 45 seconds to do this. Okay, so here you go. It's going to come in a minute. All right. Right, here you go. So what sentences are true? Yeah, you have multiple choice. All right, good. I can see some answers coming in already. Excellent. So don't forget to click on share, yeah, if people are. Okay, good. So I can see a few answers now. All right, a few seconds more. Some people could still answer this. All right. Good, 10 seconds more. Don't forget, these are anonymous, yeah. So we're just collecting information to see the understanding on blockchain, basically. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm going to end this voting now and show you the results. All right, so you can see here a lot of people have answered that blockchain is a registry of transactions, is a technology for asset transfer. Blockchain is also called Ethereum. I think and it's a banking solution. Some of them, I think I've answered that, 1 or 2%. And of course, you have blockchain as Bitcoin is a blockchain application. So largely, you can see people are tending towards, yes, registry of transactions, asset transfer, and Bitcoin being a blockchain application. Yeah, these are the primary three. So yeah, we will see. We'll go through the presentation, and then we will see how you have fared in this. But largely, I can say this is pretty much a good response, I would say. Yeah. Let's go back to the presentation now. Okay. Right, here you go. All right. So before we start, I'm going to tell you a short story. Okay, a very short story about a friend of mine who very recently wanted to buy a house. Okay. So typically, what would he do? What he did was he went on the internet, right, and then he looked at all the options possible. He gave in his requirement. He looked at his requirement. He looked at the location, the prices, basic search on what are the best things, some recommendations, testimonials by people around the location, and so on. So that's the basic data search that he did. Yeah, basic search that he did on the internet. And then what did he do? Right? He went to a title company. Right? A title company, or in some countries it's an agency or an immobilier, or basically a title company who is going to take care further on the process. So let's see what happened. So he contacted a title company, and what's the job of the title company typically? Yeah, to ensure that the property is that my friend wished to buy was having all the right papers, all the documentation. If the property had changed hands, whether there was a trace of the hands that have changed, whether the paperwork was correctly transferred every time whenever there's a change. Yeah. What was the insurance status and all that. So you see there's a lot of work, all the joys and sorrows that come along when you buy a property. So all this work is typically being done by the title company, right? So this is quite a bit of work. And what did my friend have to do here in all this? Trust, right? He had to trust the title company, and he had to trust that whatever information that they gave was authentic. Okay, so that eventually there are no legal hassles that will come up, right? So effectively, this was a work done by the title company, and my friend, all he had to do was trust that whatever information was given was correct. Yeah, that was so effectively that was the title company's job. Yeah, and my friend, all he had to do was trust. So what the title company is doing here is, as you can see, it's acting like a middleman between the buyer, who is my friend, and the seller of the property. And the title company is acting like a middleman to transfer the property or asset between two parties, right? So hold on to this story for a moment. So we have a friend of mine, a seller, and a title company who is acting as a middleman with some information to transfer the property from one place to the other. Okay. Now let's say I'll tell you another story here, which is about money transfer. Okay. So let's say somebody on this webinar, I'm going to pick up somebody. There's somebody called Frank. Okay, Frank on this webinar wants to transfer some money to my account. Thank you, Frank. Okay, if you want to transfer some money to my account, let's say Frank says he wants to transfer $100 to my account. So what does Frank do? Frank goes to his on the internet or his mobile app of the bank, or he would practically walk into his bank and then tell the bank, I wish to transfer $100 to the account of Manish. Okay, and here are his account details, right? And the bank already knows Frank's account details. So what the bank does is first check if Frank has the right, if he has $100 in his account, and then checks the beneficiary, puts me as a beneficiary, checks has some checks, and then transfers this amount from Frank's account to my account, right? So again, what has happened here is a simple transaction. But what Frank has done in the process is again put trust on the bank, right? Like a middleman, like in the title company. They're putting trust on this middleman to check his account, to make the verifications, check the beneficiary account and so on, and then do the transfer. Okay. So this is another example of putting trust into a middleman. Okay. Like a bank in this case, and before we saw the title company. Let's come closer to business now. So we talk about data storage. Okay. So effectively it says by 2020, we will have around 20 billion devices connected on the net, through IoT or different ways, and they're going to generate terabytes and terabytes of data, right? So this data effectively has to be stored somewhere in a secure way. Then whenever we need it, we're going to search and retrieve this data, yeah, So there's a lot of work involved there. Okay, so since a few years, companies were having their, and still are having their own data servers, right, to maintain and store this data. And then what happened? Companies decided, let's move on to a cloud-based system where they don't really own the data servers, but they share space along with similar other companies, right, effectively. But what is happening here is, again, we are still putting trust. Yeah, we're still putting trust on this central agency that is owning the data servers and the storage devices, right? So just imagine a case that there was a massive power outage and the backup took a long time to come back, or worse, there was no backup, or there was a big hack and all the data was lost. Yeah, so there could be multiple issues like that, and ultimately all these are pointing to one case where we have trust being we are entrusting something to a third party who is managing all these details, right? Now let's think of an alternate solution here, and blockchain is precisely that. Precisely, it's a solution where it is attempting to replace the middleman. Okay, so I'm not saying that we are not yet debating whether what is the value add of the middleman. Of course, middleman is existing at this point of time because there is a value add. So we're not going to go in that debate. But the blockchain is an attempt to eliminate this this middleman, and we will see some examples eventually that will help. Okay, and this is an attempt to create a system. Blockchain is an attempt to create a system where we are going to distribute the trust. We'll see the examples like this. We're going to distribute the trust. Okay, so if you take the example of money transfer, Frank here, before he went to the bank for the transfer, but imagine Frank announces on this forum, okay, everybody is there, there are more than around 40 people, and he says, listen, I want to transfer $100 from my account to the account of Manish. He announces on this forum, okay, and there's no central agency, remember, called the bank. So this network of connected entities, like everybody here, the network of connected entities validates this transaction. We are talking at a very macro level here, but imagine that this connected entity validates the transaction. What we are doing now is we are putting the trust in a very open, distributed network, yeah, across a large network. And that is one of the skeletal properties of blockchain, trust that is open and distributed across a larger network. Okay, so just as a quick history, the basic notion of blockchain came in 2008, just after the Lehman Brothers debacle, where a person who calls himself Satoshi Nakamoto, he came up with a white paper. It was called Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, which actually used blockchain as a platform. And blockchain was a platform for this electronic cash system. Let's look at some of the properties that we can see here of blockchain. Okay, so as a first layer or first level, we can call it as an open distributed ledger. Okay, open distributed ledger or a registry of transactions. Okay, like we saw before in the example of the money transfer or the title transfer, there is a transaction, and here we are talking about an open distributed registry of transactions. Okay, this is the basic property. You can see the difference in the graph where you have a centralized agency in the first, the left diagram, and then on the right we have something which is more distributed. Okay, so we're talking about this distributed open ledger as a skeletal property of blockchain. Some other properties that we have is this ledger or registry of transaction is immutable. Okay, that means no one can go back in the system and tamper with the records. Okay, once the network validates the transaction, it becomes immutable, right? Like if you take the bank, for example, now Frank has transferred $100 to me, but the bank might technically go back and reverse some transaction, right? It can technically, or the title company could probably tamper with some proof of ownership or the transfer of properties before my friend wanted to buy this, right? So effectively what we are doing here with blockchain, once the records are written onto the system, they become tamper proof and immutable. Okay. The second property is more classical. It's timestamp, so we know who does what at what time, what date, etc. Right. So this is more classical property of timestamping it. Right. And the third one, which is an important one again, is about encryption of data, where we talk about privacy and security. Okay, and each entity doing the transfer typically won't be known to everybody in the network, yeah, as the data will be encrypted. So for example, if Frank is transferring Manish $100, all the network sees is that there's one number, which is a bit complex, is transferring $100 to another number, right? They don't see us as these individuals, but just as numbers. So there is protection of privacy and there is security involved in that. Okay, so to summarize, we can say blockchain is typically an open distributed ledger, okay, that has the properties of being immutable, timestamped, and encrypted. Okay, so this is effective. Let me show you an example of an actual screenshot that I took this morning from the Ethereum blockchain. Yeah, you can see that it's etherchain.org. So I went into and just took a snapshot to show you how it looks. So there's blocks, there's transactions, and then you have the detailed transactions where you have some transaction happening from to. You can see there's all numbers given. So we're not going to go into technical details here of what is the gas price or what is the hash and so on. But effectively you can see that it looks encrypted, and there is a registry of transactions happening every second. Okay, to show you how it looks like effectively. Okay, right. So we talk about Ethereum blockchain, which is classically a public blockchain like Bitcoin, for example. But then there are possibilities which is more closer to businesses where there could be private blockchains, which means there is authorization only to some. There is access to get into the blockchain to some authorized people only. So there could be private blockchains as well, right? But effectively, the properties remain the same of immutability. Then you have timestamping and encryption, yeah, and the basic skeletal property of an open distributed ledger still remains. Okay, right. So, so as a summary, we have a comparison between the traditional approach of transfer of assets, for example, where you have a central governance which is using which is there as a middleman and is joining party 1 and 2 as a middleman. Okay, and then you have a distributed ledger where we have blockchain in the middle, where you have party 1 and party 2. There's the auditor and the bank also. It is also possible that this central governance becomes a part of the blockchain. That entity, central governance entity, also becomes a part of the blockchain. Okay, so we're not eliminating, it could be also participative in the blockchain. So this is a difference that you see from the traditional way to a more distributed way. Okay, right. I hope the explanation was okay in terms of the basic properties that blockchain has, and then some of the other properties about timestamping and encryption that it carries. Okay, so like what we do is typically in a classical old school methodology, I'm going to throw you 2 more polls. Okay, very quickly, take around 45 seconds, 1 minute maximum, and you can give the answers. Again, multiple answers possible, anonymous. You can provide your answers and we'll talk about those as well. This is basically on the understanding of blockchain so far that you have got from the webinar. Okay, so I'm going to put in a poll now. Here you go. Okay, you can start responding. And again, don't forget to click on the and vote. Yeah, that's where you get the registration. All right, excellent. So let's just wait. More than 60% responses now. Let's just wait. So you have. Right, give you 10 seconds more. People who have not responded. Excellent. So we have more than 75% of responses now. So I'm going to end the voting now in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Up. I'm going to share the results. So you can see the results here on screen. So as you rightly identified, typically all kinds of transactions or records can be effectively stored on a blockchain. I'm not going to get into technical details, but you can see that there could be identity records, banking operations, as we just saw Frank giving $100 to me, or retail transactions, medical records, origin of a good, and you'll see some examples that Krutil will give you. Bill of lading, property certificates, etc. So all these are the transactions that can be effectively stored, records that can be effectively stored on a blockchain. So that's great. So I'm going to go through another survey now. Okay, this is a quick one, again, based on what we have spoken so far. Okay, hold on just a second. And you're going to get the question in front of you right now. Okay, so here you go. So what elements are indispensable to implement a blockchain solution? All right, good. Are we getting some responses now? 30% already. Okay, so you have a bank, a central government, access to a specific network infrastructure, and a regulatory agency. Good, more than 80% this time. Going to close in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, I'm going to share the results. Here you go. Right, so you rightly identified again, access to a specific network infrastructure is one of the key indispensable elements, let's say, to implement a blockchain solution. Again, whether it's a private or public blockchain, we'll talk about that later. But an access to a specific network becomes an indispensable part. The others, not so much, as you have rightly recognized. Okay, so looking at, go back to this now. What can I do? What's in it for me now? Now that I've understood the basics of blockchain, how can I implement it in a business scenario? So for that, we'll just look at, we'll revisit some of the basics of, the value chain equation, or the value chain graph, as we said, typically done by Mr. Porter many years ago, right? Where you have classically inbound operations, outbound marketing, sales, service, and so on. And there are different touch points, and we'll talk about 2 touch points here. Touch points where you have the business interacting with external entities. Okay, for example, let's take one example here for the automatic payment, right? Imagine your supplier comes in and delivers something to your plant, right? What you do typically, then you check the goods, all okay. The supplier is going to give you an invoice, right? And then you pay your supplier, right? I hope you pay your suppliers, yeah. Then you pay your suppliers typically. That's one touch point in interacting with an external agency. On the same side, if you look at the other side, on the where you have a customer service representative, maybe interacting with a customer, sends across an invoice, and then the customer pays. And again, I hope the customer pays, right? So you have you can see different touch points. And imagine that there is an automatic payment at the delivery of a shipment, or an automatic payment of a commission of a sale, right? So there could be different elements where we see that these touch points exist. And this is a simple supply chain. So as supply chains get more and more complex, more and more complex, with a lot of interactions between different ecosystems in the business, this is going to get more complex. The touch points are going to increase even more, right? And now imagine a system in these complex ecosystem where you have a potential of transferring this information or assets or money across the entire ecosystem in a smooth, open, distributed, immutable manner, right? Imagine this flow happens in a smooth, open, distributed, and immutable manner, where we wouldn't need to put our trust on one central system, but we are putting our trust on the entire ecosystem itself. Yeah, you get the point now. There's a lot of possibilities, right? So I wouldn't want to step on to what Clotilde is going to tell you eventually, but just to warm you up, then effectively telling that, look, there are a lot of touch points across different ecosystems, and the basic point is transfer of information, assets, or money, or whatever it is, through a seamless way in an open and distributed manner. That is one of the skeletal properties, as we said now. And then again, we have time stamping and encryption and all. So these always remain, right? So think about that. And to give you a more concrete example, think about something like a smart contract, right? If you look at a contract, what is a contract? A contract is a legally binding agreement, classically, between two or more parties. And what is a smart contract? We say a smart contract is a piece of software, just as a macro level. It's just a piece of software that self-executes in blockchain the terms or agreements that have been agreed upon by the parties. Like, let's say an example, we consider two parties negotiating, right? Agreeing to certain terms and conditions. And now there is, and these terms and conditions are now transferred and written as code in blockchain, okay? Now, what happens when a triggering event happens? So let's say a triggering event like an expiration date, the contract expires. There could be some another event that can be triggered following, or the code that is executed following this expiration date, right? There could be similar examples, like let's say you receive the goods and you check, you receive the invoice, and a payment can be triggered. Supplier is sending you an advanced shipment notification. Maybe there is some warehouse process that is triggered to receive these goods, right? So there could be multiple examples like this, where another example could be a stock level coming down and a PO is issued, yeah? So kind of stepping onto the VMI methodology and consignment methodology. So we're not getting into that, but effectively one event which triggers off automatically a piece of software that self-executes as part of the agreed terms and conditions between the two or more parties, right? Effectively, that's what we are coming at. So many examples like this in the business world, right? We'll look at some classical ones in a supply chain now. Yeah. So if you wish to buy a product, say if you wish to buy a product or some groceries, right? You get into a shop, and how do you ensure the authenticity of these products? How do you ensure the authenticity of this product? Yeah, you simply have to trust the label that is managing it, right? So imagine now if the entire life cycle of the product, from its fabrication, or if you're buying grocery, from the production which is done by the farms, right, throughout till the consumer gets it, through the distributors, through the retailers, everybody, all the entities in the supply chain, they have visibility, they have the track. They have the right authentication and validation done by each of these entities at every step in the blockchain. That makes it more authentic, right? That makes it more authentic. And you're putting all this in the blockchain, where the final customer can also see, who is a part of the blockchain, can also see the flow, the authenticity of this particular product. Same thing with the labeling of quality. If you want to make sure that there are certain products which are which are qualified by certain agencies. Again, this could be one of the examples where blockchain could be implemented, right? And the third example here is simply the entire visibility in the supply chain itself, right? So as we said before, supply chains are becoming more and more complex with the ecosystems. So you can see that there could be some tracking required, some tracing required of your goods from the origin till you get it in your warehouse, till you get it in your factories, right? So effectively, it is all these multiple systems involved from the transfer of the goods or the product from one place to the other. There are multiple systems involved, right? There could be a transporter, there could be customs people, a lot of people involved in the supply chain. So imagine that all these multiple systems are in sync on the same platform through blockchain, right? So this is where you can see the different potentials of blockchain. And to tell you a bit more details about all the applications of blockchain in supply chain, a bit more in detail, I invite my colleague Clotilde to take you through the rest of the presentation. Clotilde, over to you.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Manish, for this, let's say, general presentation of blockchain. And now as you just said, we are going to deep dive into some experimentation, experiences, pilots that are going on. So first of all, I would like to just to focus on the sectors that where blockchain could be applied. So what are the industrial or services sectors where the blockchain can be implemented? Well, according to us, the answer is pretty simple: is that all sectors can be potentially impacted by blockchain. We don't see any sector that cannot be potentially impacted, or where blockchain cannot be implemented. So if you think about one, please share it with us, because that would be really interesting discussion. Here we've focused on four different sectors, and starting with the banking sector, where companies are working really hard already in order to test solutions for faster settlements between banks, or even to facilitate the identification of the customers, which is known as the Know Your Customer tools, or I would say between brackets, simply to store the history of all the transactions that they are making over their all operations. So that's for the banking system. If we move to the pharma industry, there is also quite a big traction in the pharma industry to build systems that will help the companies in order to show that they comply to the drugs regulation of their country. So heavy regulation to be followed in this sector, and then the blockchain could be a very good tool in order to show this compliance. And also pharma industry is testing a blockchain in order to fight against fraud, and to give a higher trust to the final consumer that the pill or whatever kind of medicine is buying is really what is supposed to take. And then in the retail sector, the probable most popular example of let's say pilot for this blockchain implementation is to guarantee the origin of the food, and to give trust to the customer that the data that is disclosed on the label of any kind of pack is trustable. So the information that a product can embed can go from the origin of the ingredients, or the way that the product has been transported, has it been as fresh as it should have been, or even the sustainable condition of manufacturing of this product. So really a lot of traction as well to give trust to the final consumer. And then for the automotive sector, which is the last one that we are focusing on this slide, where a lot of applications are on the way in terms in particular of setting up the identity card of a car, so that all along the life cycle of the car, anybody can have all the technical insights, or the maintenance review, or the issues that happen to this car, and at any time the owner, the garage, or even the retailer, everybody can have access to this information, so that they can act faster and more accurately. And also in the car industry, it could be a good tool in order to track the origin of the critical part of the car, and in case of an issue, it will help to make a much faster recall of the cars. And not highlighted on this slide, but very interesting as well to implement blockchain, are the sectors like the energy sector that will be impacted in order to register the purchases and the sale of energy between companies, or to register the production of private people. That there are some topics companies are working on. Also in the entertaining and touristic sector, also the blockchain will be an interesting tool for loyalty programs, for example, where the interoperability between programs will be enabled, and then you will be allowed to use the points of one loyalty program in the network of shops of another loyalty program. So you won't be stuck anymore with a really high number of points on a loyalty program where you don't find how to use these points. And also the logistic and the transport sector obviously is very much impacted, but we'll go through some example a bit later. So now that we've seen the sectors that can be impacted, and again it's all sectors, let's move to the function inside a company that can be impacted by the blockchain. And basically the rule is as simple as for the industry sector, is that all function can be potentially impacted by the blockchain implementation. And again, it's like for sectors, if you see, if you can imagine a function that cannot be transformed in some way by the blockchain, please share the information with us, because that could be interesting. So it goes from HR to manufacturing and so on and so forth. So, for example, for the human resources sector, we can think about the payroll, for example, and the integration of a commission that are linked to the reward for a sales representative. Or you can think about the polling inside big companies that can be managed easier under blockchain technology. In the manufacturing area, blockchain will help a machine to get much more autonomous, and potentially to pay for the services directly to some services providers that are coming to make some maintenance, for example, on this specific machine. And also, it will be a very good tool in the manufacturing sector in order to register the transaction in the 4.0 factory new environment, new business model that is being implemented slowly by slowly. So moving to R&D, which is another function of the company, where definitively the blockchain will enter through the IP area licensing and innovation registration, for example, or in the 3D printing in order to make sure to control the material that is being used in order to produce some parts, or the number of parts that have been printed, or even the company that printed the part. So very interesting in the R&D function as well, and also in the marketing area, application are about, for example, eliminating some of the middlemen in the advertisement, purchasing and sale process. So in this process of purchasing and sale advertisement, there's a lot of middlemen between all the actors that are, let's say, eating slowly by slowly the whole value of the chain. And if you can have let's say a smarter system that do not need all these middlemen, then you can revert more value at the end of the chain to the consumer. And in the marketing system, it's also about embedding more information on the product, about the origin of the product, the condition of production, all this information that can be trustable finally, and that will add a lot of value to the final consumer, because they will be able to trust completely this information. And also not focused on this slide, but very important, is that supply chain, for which we will make more focus a bit later in this presentation, but it is definitively a function that will be impacted by the blockchain. So for some of this application that I started to mention in this presentation of sectors and functions that will be impacted, you might think, oh, you know what? I already have this function. My capex can already communicate with an external service provider, or I already track the origin of the goods that I'm selling to my consumer, or I can know at any time where is the good that is being transported from my vendor to my to my retailer. Yes, that's probably true. But don't forget that in today, according to the way that we are working, which is not the blockchain, obviously, the data that is collected is stored at only one part, and whenever someone else legitimately needs this information, then it can become very long in order to retrieve this information. For example, if we take the information about tracking where is my good on the road, so it's good that your logistic company can have a GPS on the truck, but then the information is stored by the logistic company. So whenever you need the information, then you need to go through this logistic company, or even if they put if they make available this information through any system, then you don't know how is governed this data. You don't know if this data can be manipulated or changed in case there is an issue, whatever. And also, in order to manage all this data that is collected and picked at many stages of any value chain, it requires really heavy IT infrastructure to secure and back up the data storage, and that's a big issue in all companies. And then the data storage, by definition, is weak and can be hacked. And as seen before, the blockchain is fixing all these issues of the governance of the data, where it is collected, if it is accessible by one part or by all part, and to have a lighter infrastructure in order to give this access to data to all the actors. Just a quick word about who is let's say starting to play with the blockchain. Well, it's not only startups that are working on the blockchain. Really big players are already investing a lot in the blockchain in order to understand what would be the best use case, what is the exact added value of the blockchain in their operation, and also to identify what are the main issues of implementing the blockchain. And for example, in the FMCG sector, you've got a Walmart that is working on a use case that is about the traceability of the pork along the supply chain. Unilever and Nestle are working on similar use case as well. You've got Maersk in the logistic area that set up now a joint venture with IBM in order to manage the documentation of all the ocean freights that they are operating. That is really a very heavy management, because there is really a lot of documentation going with the container and going through many different actors. So that's a big issue for them. And then obviously the banks and the insurances companies are investing really a lot in this new technology. And it's not only Walmart, the banks, and Maersk, and so on. It's also the technology companies that are investing a lot. Obviously, IBM and companies like Microsoft are very much involved into this transformation. But also editors like SAP, Oracle are now seeing that they need to understand what kind of change and transformation the blockchain will bring to companies in order to adapt also their own system in order not to be completely outdated in the years to come. This won't be in the 2 years to come, obviously, but as blockchain will be registering a lot of transactions, then at some stage, people like SAP Oracle that are registering also transaction inside company. It can be a threat to their to their business in some ways. So they are looking also a lot on this technology in order to know how to knit their knowledge, their know-how, their capabilities to the new functionality brought out by the blockchain. So let's now move to some real use case experimentations, pilot that are on the way in the supply chain area. So we've got this famous example of tracking the origin of the food from the start of the value chain till the end. So it's for example in the fishing area, it's being able to follow up the fish from the moment that it is caught till the tin. So it's they call it from fishing to eating. Or in the coffee area, there is also a big company that is trying to do the same, experimenting the same for the coffee from the bean to the cup, in order to give the full trust to the consumer that the type of coffee that is consuming is exactly what the money that is has paid for. It's the quality that he purchased, and all the condition of transformation of this coffee from the beginning till the end. And there's also another very famous example that is about diamonds. So probably none of us is buying a diamond on a regular basis, but it's also, as it is a high value good, then some people understood that the blockchain could be a very good technology in order to register each single diamond, in order to identify its origin, that it doesn't come from a war area, for example, or that is not a fake. So as soon as it is registered in the blockchain, then it cannot be copied or transformed or whatever, or sold if it is a fake. And also it can register the ownership of the diamond at any moment of the life cycle of this diamond. If we move to go a bit deeper into this experimentation regarding container movement along the supply chain, as you know, there are many containers moving all around the world in order to bring goods from one point to the other. And as most of you probably know, there's a really heavy documentation that is following up the container in order to have it moving, crossing borders, going from one continent to the other, to be able to show that the goods comply to all the laws and regulation of the country that it is entering, and so on and so forth. And the documentation is so heavy that at some stages, maybe there is one document that is missing, or document that is not being validated, or whatever. And then managing all this in the blockchain then is really avoiding or making the flow of the documentation and then the flow of the container much smoother and faster, because there is never a document that is missing, because the document is available in the blockchain, and it is anybody, any actor can check this and make sure that this document is really following up its goods. So nobody can claim that the document is missing or is not being validated or whatever. And also it's a good way in order to fight against errors and fraud, which are big issues in the transportation and in the logistic, in the international trade. And this will, as said, speed up the flow of the container all along the logistic flow. And then we can move on to this goods, type of goods or assets that could become much more autonomous. So we've got this example of a pallet that tomorrow, thanks to blockchain, could become almost completely autonomous in front of choosing the vendor with whom it could go from the origin, its current localization to the next destination. So imagine that you can inform the pallet through the blockchain about the goods that you put on it, about the weight of the goods, the volume, and then the destination. Then the pallet could automatically send a request for prices to a list of selected vendors. Then the vendor sending back some prices to the pallet, and the pallet, according to an algorithm, so according to a rule set up by the company, then decide with which vendor, going from its localization, its current position to the next destination. So would it be the cheapest company? Would it be the historic company? If it is not 5% or 10% more expensive than the cheapest, or would it be the fastest company? So the rule can be set up by the company, and then the pallet is, let's say, deciding on by itself and informing the vendor that it can come and pick it up to go to the destination set during the request for prices. And also regarding capex, that's also some good use cases in order to follow up with the execution, the good execution of payment terms. So if you have been dealing with the purchase of capex, and in big companies where you've got capex all around the world, and where each capex may have its own terms of payments and so on and so forth, you can lose track of the payment terms, as it be paid, should it be paid, and so on and so forth. And then with the blockchain, this can be improved very much, and you can have a better grip on the good execution of these payment terms. Also, a better, higher grip on the exclusive use of your capex. If it is used by a vendor, then you can control that the capex is not being used for other purposes than your own business. And also in terms of ownership of the capex, then the blockchain is the perfect tool in order to make sure that everybody is aware about which capex is the property of which actor, and so on and so forth, and then have all the risk around this capex being identified. So that's some of the experimentation that we can speak about. So now that we have detailed examples, you can ask yourself that it's this blockchain is a virtual environment, when the supply chain, everything that we've just mentioned before, the fish, the coffee, the pallet, and so on, are very physical assets or goods. So how does the interface is made? So the interface is basically made with sensors, and sensors today, more or less, the sky is the limit. The technology is allowing really a lot of different types of censoring of any goods. Even for the fish, you can put a kind of a gel that is able to communicate with the network in order to send some information about this fish. And well, sensorizing is really not an issue. And then the point is that if you want to implement a blockchain in supply chain, then basically what you are doing is that you are creating a virtual copy of your supply chain under the blockchain. And then each time that, for example, this bottle of liquid perfume or alcohol or whatever you can think about, juice or water, then each time that this bottle will be moved, then there would be a transaction registered in the blockchain, and then as long as this bottle is moving through the supply chain, then the registered transaction is getting bigger, and then you can trace exactly what happened to this bottle, to this very specific bottle of liquid. And then it's in the physical environment. Then probably this transport company will know about the time that they pick up the bottle at the manufacturing company, but then maybe the retailer would like to know if this transport is ongoing or not, and then how does this retailer or how does this ocean freight company knows that the good is arriving on time. He needs to phone to this company. Maybe the person is not here, then has to phone to the manufacturing company. So in the case of the blockchain, then this actor here would have access to the information and showing what is the status of this very unique battle. So it's really a one unique ledger available to all authorized people. So that's the way that you are interfacing the physical world, the real world, and the virtual world of blockchain. And now, now that we've seen a detailed example and so on and so forth, showed the added value, we would like to walk you through some limits of the blockchain, because the blockchain won't solve all the issues of your company or of your processes. It's not an all-issue solver. So we don't want to mislead our communication, saying that it will solve everything of the current issues of a company, because you've got the two biggest limits that we can think about right now is about scalability. So coming from registering a small number of transactions and going to registering a really high number of transactions at the same time. So scalability can be an issue, and regulation is a limit also as well, because as you know, the framework, the legal framework, is not completely solved. And it's also important to always think about blockchain whenever you would like to think about blockchain, to really understand if the blockchain is the technology that you need for your issue. Maybe there are some other technology that might fit better or that be more efficient than blockchain. So an easy, I would say the first check is that for the blockchain, the process that can be improved thanks to blockchain are processes where you've got a high volume of transaction, where you've got a high number of actors, and when you are lacking trust in between the actors. So that's really the moment where the blockchain can be implemented, or that you can think at least about a blockchain. So now I will give you another 30 seconds or 45 seconds in order to answer to the next poll, so just to have a short break in my speech. And please, so the question is, what are the benefits of blockchain? So multiple choice. So please give us your answers. So it's good because it's already 15% of the people have answered. And please do not forget to finalize, to send your vote at the end of your voting. So I will give you a bit more time. Okay, good. We're reaching 75%. Okay, good. 80%, maybe. So I think it's good enough. 85%, very good. Maybe another couple of percent. So I will give, okay, 5 seconds more. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and then thank you very much for your participation. So as you can see here, oh gosh, I think I skipped. Sorry, I think I skipped the. Oh yeah, thanks, Sinmara. So I think you get the point, because all the 5 solutions were applicable. So the benefits can be all those. I see that there is probably some doubts about privacy of the blockchain. So as Manish was saying, is that everything is encrypted in the blockchain, so that the privacy can be protected. So that's one part of the answer that we can. And the immutability also is a bit less than the others. Immutability is really one of the big benefit of the blockchain. Once a transaction has been registered and has been said to be good, then the transaction you cannot come back to the transaction in order to modify it. So that's really a big benefit of the blockchain. So coming back to the presentation, and in order to wrap up, let's say, is that after having explained what is blockchain and showed the use cases and the experimentation, we would like to share with you some takeout. And our main takeout here is that we really think that procurement should take the lead on this transformation to come. And why is it so? It is so because, first of all, it is adding value. Adding value to the business. And it is agilizing the processes. So it's really about bringing new ways of working to your business partners. So that's the first point. And then, in order to implement a blockchain, you will need to speak to your vendors. You cannot build up a blockchain for your own internal purposes, or in very few cases it should be the case. But normally the blockchain is to start to communicate with your environment. So most of it will be a vendor. So implementing a blockchain will be about motivating and supporting vendors in the change management, and in order to have them to believe also in this technology and to help you to implement it. And then the third point is that you will need to contract, because most probably in your companies there is no expert in blockchain, so you will need to go out and find the good partner in order to set up whatever the proof of concept or the pilot, or to scale up a solution. So you will need some experts and some external companies in order to set up to build a blockchain. So it's about contracting with these vendors. So again, it's about new ways of working, bringing new ways of working inside the company. It's about speaking with the vendors and about contracting. So it's really the three key pillars of the procurement function. So that's why we really think that procurement should lead this transformation. And we can go step by step in order to lead this transformation by becoming, first of all, as a first step, the champion of the blockchain in the company. So being able to speak about the technology, explain the added value, let understand the people where it can apply, where it cannot apply, and so on and so forth. And then also, as step 2 and step 4, to understand what's going on at your customers. So it's very important to understand what your customers are doing against blockchain, because if they are working hard with blockchain, then one day they will come to you in order to change your own way of working, in order to be able to work with them under a blockchain environment. So it's better to be ready. And the same with your vendors. It's very important to understand what is the maturity of your vendors in order to be ready faster the day that you would like to implement and deploy a blockchain project. And then the two steps that are the more complex but bringing the more value to the company, obviously, is to understand inside your own procurement and supply chain processes what would be the best use case where to implement the blockchain, and then do the same exercise but for the core business, so for the core of the business of your company. So, and then this would be about going to your marketing VP, to the business development VP, or even to the CEO, and say, look, you know what, with the blockchain we could improve our business with that functionality or the other. So we spoke about, for example, embedding more information about a product. If we are speaking about a production company, so you can give trust to your final consumer with a higher level of information, and information that is stored in the blockchain, so that cannot be modified. So this is something that that you can speak out with a marketing VP at some stage. And then, so it's really a question of taking the steering wheel, or being and drive the change, or being driven by other functions, because blockchain companies, experts, consultants, and so on and so forth are going to speak, are right now speaking with CEOs, with the VP of marketing, VP of business development, VP of supply chain. So it's very important that and maybe procurement is not seen as right now as the best target for these people to work with. So it's important to come on the scene, I would say, and start to lead the operation. Because if you don't do so, then one day someone will come in order to ask you to sign up an invoice for, you know, in order to pay a company that would have developed a pilot or a proof of concept, and you wouldn't know anything about this company, what they would have done and why, and so on and so forth, and it's very frustrating. So it's better to be at the beginning of the process, and not being involved so late when the invoice is coming on your desk. And also, if it's not about the invoice of an IT company that has developed a proof of concept or a pilot, then someone will come in order to ask you to speak to your vendors, because they've developed this brilliant system under blockchain, but then they need the vendors to start to work with it, and then they will come to procurement in order to speak with the vendors. So very important as well in that sense, so that you don't come at the end of the process, but rather steer the wheel from the beginning. So basically, that's it from my side. I want to thank you very much for participating to this webinar, and we will now be ready with Manish to answer any question that you might have, that you probably have, because we go a bit fast, and this has probably raised some question. So Manish, maybe I hand it over to you in order to start to address some of the questions.
Yeah, hold on. I'm just opening the questionnaire. So there is one here, Christian, asking, blockchain is trust. I'm just reading verbatim. Okay. Hold on one second. Video. All right. It says blockchain is trust. Why the saying garbage in and garbage out would not impact blockchain information? Right. So your point is, Christian. Your point is, so first of all, thank you for this question. Your point is, like in any other system, you have garbage in and garbage out, right? And when we talk about immutability of the blockchain, you know, as one of the properties, this could create an issue as well. So to a certain extent, this issue was identified. So there are two things I would tell here. First, if we talk about immutability, right? When we say immutability, whatever a block, let's say whatever transaction or a block is written already in the system cannot be modified. That remains, okay? However, what we could do is, if there is a wrong transaction written at some point of time and in some way it was validated, okay, eventually that transaction can be annulled. And I say annulled, it is let's say it's like accounting, like you do in accounting. You know, you have an error made, then you write if you let's say $100. If you take the previous example, then in the accounting you could write -100 and write in the new value. So we don't erase the 100, which was the error before, but then we can write the -100 as a correction and then write the new transaction, which is a part. So the data which can come in as garbage can be corrected. It doesn't mean that when we talk about immutability, we talk about immutability of that block, but effectively the data can be corrected eventually. That's number one. Okay, and number two, when we talk about garbage in or data, incorrect data coming in, it is still technically possible. Yes, that there could be human errors, right? The data is put in, and in fact, one of the ways in which this problem is being addressed today is by combining IoT, Internet of Things, with blockchain. So let's say if you want to have a reading to be recorded somewhere. Yeah, and today the reading is done by a human. There could be a sensor which could have a good validation on the calibration upfront by everybody, and that sensor can be putting in those kind of data instead of human data. So you could have IoT combined with blockchain to avoid these kind of issues. So there are some APIs that can be used to solve these. So to avoid human error, that is again possible to do it. And if you look at a technical aspect, I won't get into that too much. Technical aspect, there has been already an improvement to where we talk about newer cryptocurrencies, including Peercoin and Neo and so on, where they are using something called proof of stake as opposed to proof of work, where it talks about when we talk about getting consensus for validation, it is already an improved format from the first Bitcoin that came in. So in multiple ways, as I said, number one, to remove the human error, there could be IoT and other areas to take in, to make sure that the data is right. If at all it is wrong, then there is the immutable will maintain that incorrect transaction. But however, there is still possible to correct it and then put in the right entry. This is another way. And then with IoT and other APIs, there are different solutions out there which are trying to address this issue, right? Of trying to correct the garbage in that comes in terms of getting the consensus right, validation right in the first step itself. Okay, I hope that can answer some part of your doubt. Yeah, I will look at another one. Protil, you want to look at the next one and opening the.
Yes, the next. If you can shut down your audio, Manish, maybe.
Sorry.
That's fine. Okay, so the next question is about blockchain provides visibility for all in the chain. However, some information shouldn't necessarily be shared with everyone, like pricing. How can you separate these items so that it's not visible to everyone in the chain? So that's a good question, and that's something maybe we didn't address that in details in the presentation. Is about public and private blockchain. So most probably in the companies, what will be set up will be a private blockchain, where it's not everybody that can have access. Like Mani showed you the Ether chain list of transactions. This is a public blockchain, so anybody can go and check the list of transactions. In a private blockchain, then only the authorized people would have access to the chain of transaction first, and then it's also about giving access to the kind of information, so all actors do not have access neither to all the functionalities or all the information that are stored in the blockchain. So that's the way that privacy can be also protected in a private blockchain, because you're true that, for example, you cannot give access to your prices to any of the actors that you will be embedding into your blockchain environment. So this will be managed through a private blockchain, where the access you've got a different level of access to the different actors. And then we had another. Sorry, Manish, maybe you can follow up, because I think that Charles put another complement to his question, but maybe we can take another one. Or do you want to take another one, Manish, maybe? And I will look at the other one and prepare for the next one. Manish? Okay, so it sounds that Manish is not answering. So IoT.
No, my audio was off. I'm here. Okay. All right. Just a second. I'm looking at there are quite a few questions coming up, so the chat is moving rapidly. Hold on. Right. So here you have Charles. So after the virtual order done, is the collecting of all information, transaction A, B, C, D done manually? I'll have to refer to this. Clotilde, is that yours? I think he's talking about the bottle that you mentioned. The bottle.
Yes.
I'm just going
Yes.
to the here. I think it's transaction A, B, C, D.
Yes,
He's talking
exactly.
about this one, Charles. Yeah.
As you were saying, Manish, earlier in maybe your audio, Manish.
Yeah, I'm going to.
Okay, sorry for this. So, Charles, as Manish was saying, is that all this is a question of the system that will be put in place. Either it can be when you say manual. I don't know if you refer that that you have to put the information directly in the system, or if flashing a QR code would be manual to your mind. But anyway, obviously, in order to avoid the garbage in, garbage out, as you were referring to, that there is as much as less human action as possible. So if it's about flashing a QR code, obviously there's a human action, but then the person cannot change the QR code itself. So I would say I would consider this is automatic. So the person do not have access to change the data that is collected, which is the most important, but then the data is collected. So it's true that in this flow, in order to make it faster and much more reliable, you have to put in place as much automatic operation as possible in order to make the registration. So that's where the IoT is very important. I don't know if it answers completely to your question, but I think more or less it is the case. So Manish, maybe you pick up the next one.
I think there are quite a few questions flowing in. So what we could do is we'll pick up some, and what we'll do is we'll document the answers for the others and send it across to you after like we would send the presentation. Okay. Then we'll answer all these questions that you have raised, and we'll also send it in documentation. But I'll just pick up another one. I think there's one which says was raised by Mathieu's, and he says in large capex construction projects where there are more parties, can private blockchain be used to serve as a smart contract and automatically execute payments when a part of the work is delivered by any of the subcontractors? Yeah, in fact, yes. The short answer is yes, absolutely. So in projects, where you have more than one parties like this executing part of the contractor, or even sharing the capital expenditure, that can also be tracked, and smart contracts can be executed amongst parties, not only between two, but amongst multiple parties, whenever a part of the work is delivered. Right. So certainly this is a direct use of blockchain. Obviously, as you rightly recognize, it will be a private blockchain of whoever are the entities in that particular ecosystem. It could be one, two, or three multiple subcontractors with the company, and then some freelancers, some engineers, some other subcontractors maybe, or some EPCM company, and so on. So these guys, they are there in the blockchain, and then there is a construction project, and you have multiple deliverables done by different people, and they can be the smart contract can govern the automatic execution of projects across these of part of the projects across these companies, right? So certainly that can happen. Okay. I'm just looking at another one. There is one question which says from I'm not sure if I'll get this name right. Yeah, sorry, excuse me if I don't pronounce it correctly. It's Ike Chukwu, who says, how can blockchain technology affect positively on trust elements between the echelons of a network? Trust element. So I think the very notion to have the trust distributed amongst these people would amongst the entities or amongst the actors in the blockchain gives gives a motivation to each party that they should not make any fraud, right? Because once that is done, that it is recognized by everybody, that it is already creating issues with this particular entity. So when you have this trust distributed across a network, everybody by default is going to behave as correct as possible. Yeah, as correct as possible. So this already gives a good, let's say, a good a trustability or positiveness, as you say, of trust elements between the network, right? Because there is no incentive to behave in an incorrect way for any of the people in the ecosystem, because the very notion that each party in this ecosystem has agreed to be a part of the blockchain in order to govern the flow of information in a right way should already induce positivity in every actor of the network. Okay, so this is something I'm just looking at others. I think there are a few more questions, but as we said, Protil, do you want to take one last one here, and then we will because we'll run out of time, and then we can send across information by email later on.
Yes. So, sorry if I don't pick your question as the last one, but I will take the very last one that has been published on the chat. And again, as Manish said, we'll pick up the other one through a writing document. Who will be, sorry for the one that just published now, but it's the penultima, who will be governing party that provides various levels of access to the various parties in the chain. Does that not mean there will be one central governing body to accomplish this? So yes, you in a sense you're right, is that if we go to private blockchain, there will be a need of someone that will give some access to the parties and so on and so forth. So it can become a kind of a centralized system, but again, this wouldn't be a centralized system as the one before, because it will be about the access, but then all the rules in order to accept the transaction would be set up and agreed by all the parties. Then all the data would be accessible to all the parties. All the parties again authorized at the same time. Once the transaction are entering the block, they cannot be modified anymore. So yes, there is a kind of a centralization. It's not a fully deployed blockchain, completely distributed as can be other kind of blockchain, and it would be the pure blockchain. But still, it's a completely different way of working. Where all the actors can have access to the same data that cannot be changed once it is said to be good by the system itself. So you are partly right, of course, but that's a weakness, or that's how to say this in English? I'm sorry, I don't know exactly how to say this, but yeah, it's one of the negative point of bringing up a private blockchain. But as you don't want, as a company, have everybody looking into your operation, you need a certain level of control. So it's moving from completely centralized governance to a much less centralized governance. But as you don't want everybody to come up into your operation, you need to still have some control on it, and the control is this kind of private blockchain. So yeah, that's you're right in a sense, but still don't forget about the fact that transactions are immutable, and validation of transaction is done by the system, by rules that have been approved by the community. So that's basically, that would be my answer. I don't know if you would agree with this, and it's an interesting discussion anyway.
Just 1 second, Clotilde, just to add one last point on what Florent raised and what you answered. There is still a debate going on, Florent, as you rightly identified, whether blockchain will create a different kind of middleman. You know, because ultimately what you're saying is, okay, there will be another central government agency, and what Clotilde said rightly is for certain access issues, as I said, yes, that is true. If you go to SAP or some other specific companies which are working right on this, but eventually the rules that are defined, which will be defined by the ecosystem itself, still have the properties of blockchain, and that and these issues are still getting addressed, right? So partly, yes, there might be a rise of another middleman, which is a risk, but these are already getting addressed to maintain the same skeletal properties of blockchain eventually. Yeah, and we might see this in the next in the next few years, the development. All right. I think we'll have to close, Clotilde. What we can do together is we'll go through these questions, and as I said, we'll answer these questions as part of our email communication, along with the PDF document of the presentation that we can send. Okay, so last few words. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you spent a decent 1.5 hours with us, and thanks for your questions and your comments and answering the polls. It was very active participation. We appreciate that. And if you have any questions, we will have our contact information in the PDF as well. So if you have any questions, please do ask, do share your comments, and let's build up this community of healthy debate where we can answer important questions regarding blockchain. Okay, thanks a lot, everybody. Clotilde, you want to say the last word? Thank you, and I'm signing off.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody, and let's continue to speak about blockchain through our communication, and you can come back to us for any further question in the weeks to come. Thank you very much again, and good luck for your day. Bye-bye.